Just recently, we saw the double release of the first 2 episodes in the new MCU series, Daredevil Born Again. To say that I was impressed by the first episode is a massive understatement. I'd well and truly fallen off the MCU beyond going to see the films and then also watching the recent Spider-Man cartoon. Although I would say that hardly counts at this point, it's not a prequel anymore. Regardless, the first episode of Born Again, Heaven's Half Hour, was tremendous. It started off with the death of key character Foggy Nelson, and then followed up with a long, slow build to Wilson Fisk being elected mayor of New York City, whilst Matt continues to refuse to become Daredevil again. Plus his friendship with Karen swirling the toilet, and he's filled with dread about Fisk coming to power, but at least he has a girlfriend now. I wonder how long that's gonna last. Now we're back with episode 2, Optics. We start off the episode with Wilson Fisk's inauguration speech. Beforehand, the dude seems so depressed, just sitting there listlessly staring out, begrudgingly letting people fix up his suit before they go to air. I have to wonder, if you seem so unenthusiastic about your life, why would you go and run for mayor of New York City? Does anything make this guy happy at all? Even when he's with his wife, dude just seems to have negative aura. I know he's seemingly the villain of this show, but I don't know, I kind of find him endearing. It's weird, I never really thought of him that way in the OG Daredevil show, but here we are. As we hear his speech, which focuses on how New York is strong and can rise above the troubles it faces without the likes of the Punisher, Spider-Man, or Daredevil, we get a look at how New York itself is reacting to the election. At Times Square, it's a mix of cheers and boos. Matt, of course, looks depressed sitting in his apartment whilst he listens in to people on the street. Some like Fisk, some don't. I do wonder if it's going to change as the season progresses. Is Fisk going to develop a sort of cult of personality and get massively popular amongst the majority? Will his support fade? I kind of think it's going to be the former. Also, Spider-Man reference, no idea if contracts would actually allow him to appear or anything of the sort. It would be cool though. A Spider-Man and Daredevil team up would go so hard. At least we might get that in your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man season 2. This scene then leads into the first appearance of White Tiger. Not in his suit though, as he's heading down to catch a train, only to encounter 2 thugs pushing some dude around. From what we can hear, they claim he's been dodging them, and so it seems that they've been extorting this dude maybe. Either way, Hector interferes, they attack him, and this guy just well and truly beats their asses. Seriously, he just whoops them. And it all looks like it's going to turn out just fine for him until one of them trips onto the train tracks and gets nailed by a passing train. Oof, ouch. Fella straight up became strawberry syrup. The surviving thug then whips out a gun and trains it on Hector, telling him that he's under arrest. I do have to wonder though, why? It's established by this point that these 2 were corrupt cops. We see him beat the shit out of Hector in holding to try to get a false confession. We see that later on he goes with another guy to try to murder the witness and also tries to kill Matt. We see that they don't use any CCTV from this train station, so they likely bury the footage because it shows this guy is guilty and then Hector did nothing wrong. He only defended himself and the guy. So why wouldn't this corrupt cop, knowing all of this, just shoot him dead? Claim self-defense, then be able to easily walk away. Not to stereotype, but this is a corrupt American cop who just saw his colleague die. I figured that turning this guy into Swiss cheese would be on top of the to-do list. I realised that the episode needed some sort of plot to get the ball rolling and get Matt involved, but just slightly took me out of it. We then get to the intro credits, and the episode truly begins. We start off with another look at the BB report, this time focusing on Daredevil and whether he's missed. Based on the 2 responses that we start off seeing, I'm going to say it doesn't look like it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see Daredevil come to be viewed as a bit of an outlaw, hated by both the establishment and by a big cross-section of the public by the end of this season. I know, it just feels like that's where it's headed. We then have a scene with Fisk and his campaign manager, who's trying to get him ready for at least 7 different meet or greets with different public officials that could make or break the early days of his time as mayor, and either heed or hamper his overall agenda. Thus, they need to be schmoozed. Unfortunately for this woman, Fisk is gonna Fisk, and he begins to ramble on about the desk in his office and whether LaGuardia once sat there, telling her that his father respected the man and how he changed the face of New York City forever by standing up to the establishment and leading reform. Man, I know I said he rambled on, which I guess he does, but I was also completely sucked in by this scene. I love hearing him speak, and I guess his thoughts and discussion about LaGuardia are a reflection of what he desires to do in his own term, to change the face of the city forever. I also noticed he had some cuts on his knuckles that I do not think were there in episode 1. I could be wrong, I don't think they were. He'd been punching walls, punching people. His assistant then mentions that whilst his inauguration speech did really well with younger voters, a lot of older, more traditional voters are less convinced. She thinks that by managing to bring Vanessa into the fold, they can start to win them over, with Fisk then asking her for a bit of time to get that done. I do wonder how this is going to end up. Is she going to turn on him? They're going to fix things? Keep an uneasy partnership going? Lots of directions they can take here. Also, I like the blocking of this scene as well. When Fisk gets up and walks to the window, you see his assistant take a couple of steps to the right to get the desk between him and her. Just like that visual reminder of his intimidation factor and the physical presence he has in the scene. It then shifts over to Matt, who's at the police precinct talking to a relative of a client who's seemingly been busted for a DUI based on what Matt says about her blood alcohol content and prior convictions. It's just a throwaway story thread, as the real drama of the scene is him honing in on the sound of Hector getting his ass whooped by the NYPD, trying to get him to sign a fake confession. Matt comes to the rescue and tells him that he's going to represent him, even though he can't afford him, because he realizes that he's innocent based on what he said. Of course, when he asks him if there's anything else he can tell him, Hector says no, Matt can tell he's lying, and of course, we know that this guy's supposed to be the White Tiger, a notable vigilante. I love those sequences where he hones his hearing and listens for heartbeats or swallowing or any other signs of how somebody might be feeling. Feels very Sherlock Holmes to me, very detective, just a lot of fun. We then come to a scene where Fisk really proves himself as a man of the people type of mayor, makes a lot of big strides on his first day in office. While stuck in traffic and complaining about how he keeps having to not make waves so he can pursue his agenda later on in the future, Fisk gets out of the car when Daniel reveals that they're stuck because there's a huge hole in the road that isn't getting fixed. So what does Fisk do? He gets out and he personally approves the work to begin, whilst the crowd gathers and films him. This is all against the advice of his assistant, by the way. So it's clear that he's going to run with a more unconventional manner of doing things, actually getting things done, which is going to make his popularity soar. Hell, even she approved. Like they said, it's good optics. Of course, I think that this means that as he grows in popularity with the common man, the popularity of his vigilante rivals is going to plummet. Really interested to see how that all plays out. Back to Matt at his firm, and his two pals, Kirsten, his legal partner, and Cherry, his private investigator, are giving him grief for getting involved in Hector's case at all. It seems that both of them think that there's almost no real chance he's going to be able to win the case. And I also think that Cherry has a bit of a bias against it to begin with, because it's a cop killing, and so he's automatically going to assume the cop was in the right. At least, that's the vibe I was getting from it. Of course, Matt manages to talk them both round, first by assuring Kirsten that this is why he asked her to come on as a partner of the firm, because they both wanted to take the hard cases. The cases that nobody else was going to touch. Whilst he assures Cherry, the guy's innocent. This is what I love about Daredevil, man. I feel like so many other heroes are centered on these big events and big enemies. They do work on a macro scale. So few hero storylines focus on the smaller level situations, the common man. Even fewer of them follow through on these storylines in their civilian and hero identity. I feel as if for most superheroes there's no real difference. Their hero persona does the heavy lifting of the story, whilst their civilian side's for romance exclusively or for family stuff. Here, Matt has an arc outside of being Daredevil and outside of romance or family stuff, and it just makes the story far more compelling. Of course, the hearing doesn't go well, and bail is pretty much instantly denied. I liked this. The speed at which the judge shoots them down and how he barely even looks up from his papers sort of sets you up with the expectation that this guy's on the take and Hector is about to get railroaded. So when the judge later on sides with Matt, gives you a nice feeling of surprise. Proper subverted expectations. Next up, we come to a scene where Daniel brings BB Ulrich, the niece of that murdered journalist from the first season, to do an interview with Wilson. I really enjoyed the tone of this scene, and when Fisk first brings up her dead uncle and about how he knew him and he was a good journalist, you can sort of see her face begin to twitch. So do we reckon she has some sort of idea that Fisk was involved in her uncle's death? Of course, by involved, we mean that he brutally strangled him to death personally. Regardless, this journalist kind of bungles her interview, if you ask me. She doesn't really ask him anything at all. She just tells him the police commissioner doesn't like him and is planning to resign along with half the cops in the city, which is going to lead to chaos. She then asks about Mrs. Fisk and gets ejected from the room in short order. So she got nothing. Nothing at all. I'm pretty curious as to what they're going to be doing with her character and how involved in the story she's going to end up being. What angle is she going to come at from all of this? Really, this episode's just setting me up with a whole heap of questions. Then it's over to Heather, where she's at some sort of book signing. For the most part, this seems like a largely set-up scene in my eyes. It introduces Heather into the orbit of Wilson Fisk, with his right-hand man coming to get his book signed, and so obviously, from this has become clear that she was going to be hired as a marriage counselor for the Fisks, which is deliciously awkward, whilst there's also this other dude who definitely has the crazy eyes, who tells her he needs help and sets up an appointment. Me thinks this guy is going to end up being some sort of psycho stalker type, and that Matt is going to have to save her. Maybe he goes a little too far on this dude. I do feel like we're going to be dealing with a far darker, far more brutal version of the character going forward after Foggy's death. The thought of losing somebody else close to him could push him to snap maybe. Either way, this is definitely somebody, because they keep focusing in on him in the crowd, and they give him his own sequence to speak with her. They wouldn't bother if he was just meant to be a random extra. Here we get one of the best scenes of the episode, filled with tension and a great monologue by the police commissioner, talking about how he's not going to work with Fisk, and that he's making it his personal mission to ensure that Fisk has one of the shortest terms as mayor of New York City ever. He wants him gone in under a month. and based on what we've learned from the scene with BB, he has the power to do so. So you leave the scene thinking, oh wow, this guy's serious business. How's Fisk gonna get out of this? He doesn't want to have to resort to violence or anything of the sort, so what next? Then this guy just drops the mic and walks off. It's a great scene. I just wish they waited more than 5 minutes to have him get absolutely slapped down by Fisk with the blackmail. Yeah, he shakes his fist at him and he swears revenge like a villain from Scooby-Doo, but I do think it undid a lot of the work that they were setting up with this scene and just completely muzzled the character. As an audience member, I don't believe he's going to be able to do shit from this point onwards, especially as Fisk gets more and more popular. That's a shame. And we may as well skip ahead to that scene now and then just double back. It was a very funny scene. The dude walks in to talk some more shit after being forced to wait outside for 20 minutes. He quits and he tells Fisk that he's going to take a bunch of cops with him, only for Fisk to start laughing and smiling. He's eating a cheesesteak and telling this guy he found a really good one just outside of Philly. He shows him the wrapper, and under the wrapper is a photo of what I assume is the dude's secret son with this woman. He's a fair partner, I presume. So now Fisk has some tasty blackmail to go along with some tasty cheesesteak. He tells him there's going to be no pay raise for the cops, there's going to be no overtime minimums, and there will be no expanded cadet classes. Basically, here's the plate of shit, now you eat it. He just swats him down. The dude tells Fisk to be careful what he wishes for, but for me, the power of the words is gone. It's hard to take him seriously now. Fisk then mentions that the sandwich itself was disgusting, which got a good laugh from me. Seriously, what the hell's going on? He's becoming my favorite character. And not even for badass villain reasons. I find him endearing and funny. I'm just waiting for the penny to drop. The other big story thread going on at this time is the investigation into Hector and the discovery of his double life as White Tiger. This plays out across a couple of scenes. The first where Kirsten and Sherry go to the apartment to speak to his wife, who's hesitant about going to support him in court. They've been having problems, and I guarantee all these problems stem from his role with White Tiger. Of course, this information pisses off Matt, as this could sink the case. But here we come to that twist with the judge, who prevents this knowledge being allowed to be passed to the jurors. And this one actually caught me by surprise. I really thought the judge was going to be a complete stooge, but nope. I guess I'm just used to being so cynical about that sort of thing. After a brief chat with Cherry, where it's made clear that he thinks that the new Matt, the one who's not a vigilante, is the superior model, Matt goes off to try to figure out who that lone witness was who's going to help him win the case. At first, I was worried they were going to pull some coincidence out of their ass, like him overhearing some random on the street, but they didn't do that, and I'm not sure why I thought they would. Just for some reason I did. I know, stupid. The solution is actually rather clever, makes a lot of sense. He goes to that one lone corrupt cop who was beating the witness down, and he follows him home, which eventually leads to him overhearing his conversation with another corrupt cop with whom he plans to murder the witness. Once again, the solutions and the way in which Matt's senses work is just so awesome. Also, I'm just loving the tone of the show overall. It feels so different to everything else the MCU's doing right now. Whilst this is all going down, Matt's girlfriend Heather's having that couples therapy session with Wilson and Vanessa. Honestly, this was such a good scene that actually got me invested in the marriage of the main antagonist characters. That's another thing I'm liking so much about the show. Wilson's likable, he's endearing, he's sympathetic. He's a piece of shit, and you know that he is. But you get invested anyway. You get invested in his life. You want to see him triumph over his marital issues. Also, I felt like it did a good job of getting the audience to take it seriously, as when they're first sitting there, it is a ridiculous image. Wilson Fisk getting marriage counseling with his crime boss wife, but then over the course of the scene, the pieces fall into place. It's just great directing, great writing, and great acting from everybody. Then we come to the climax of the episode. Matt goes and gets the witness out in time and stays behind to, I guess, mock the cops and keep them from catching up. Of course, this doesn't go well for anybody. The cops start beating on him because of course they do. I especially hate that main one with that smug, punchable face. Interestingly, Matt doesn't fight back because he's trying not to be that person anymore. And so they just whoop him. They even crack his glasses. Man, as a glasses wearer, that's too far. The beating lasts just long enough to get you pissed off that he's not fighting back, and then the gun comes out and it's perfection. The arm snap, the brutality of it all, the fact that it only lasts like 15 seconds, they get no hits in and they get destroyed. The head smash into the fridge. Oh, yes. Matt snapped. I honestly thought he'd killed them. This is what I want from my hero. A daredevil who's warring within himself. On one hand, he's nice Matt Murdock, a friendly lawyer who fights for the innocent, who's tired of being a vigilante, and thus has to constantly struggle against his true nature. And then on the other hand, there's rabid Daredevil who's going farther than he ever has before, being more brutal, more violent, more cruel. It's super compelling. And it's got me hyped for the next episode. My God. And so with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.